Hey, what's up everyone? It's Brandon from Tattooing 101, and today we're going to talk about how to design for tattooing on a hand. So this could be different from tattooing on an arm or a leg because of the limited space that you have in order to tattoo this area, along with like the knuckles and everything that could kind of get in the way of creating a really good design. So today I'm going to talk about all of the great tips I've learned throughout my experience on how to draw for hands, because I do tattoo them quite a bit. And they're also probably one of my favorite areas to tattoo because if you do it right, it just looks really awesome. And make sure you guys are liking and subscribing down below, and also hit the little bell notification so that you can keep up to date on all the new videos we come out with. So before we get into the design, I wanted to touch base on a few things. So whenever you are getting set up and coming up with ideas to tattoo on a hand, you need to think about a couple of things, because not all designs are going to work. Now I'm sure you've seen pictures online to where, you know, the tattoo artist or the tattoo is on the hand, goes over the knuckles, down on the fingers, and you know that leaves for a really great tattoo. You know, there's a couple out there of like a skull holding over your face, and the eyeballs go up on the fingers, things like that. But in actuality, whenever it heals, all of the areas over the knuckles down here are completely gonna fade out, and it's not gonna look like the rest of the tattoo at all, which leaves a tattoo not being as good as it could. So these are all things that new artists wouldn't really know that could definitely affect the way their tattoos heal in the future. So if you are first starting out, I definitely don't recommend that any new artist tattoo on the hands for at least 2 to 3 years. And that kind of also depends on how much time you've spent under the tattoo machine. If you haven't gotten much time and you've been tattooing for 2-3 years, I definitely still would not recommend until you're 100% confident and you could do a perfect tattoo without any problems. Because tattooing on a hand can be a lot different than tattooing on an arm for other reasons besides just the area. You know, the skin can be different. Healing's also really hard because people are always using their hands. The skin's always making new skin because they're damaging it. Washing their hands all the time. All of these could go into how it heals, which can be a really big issue if you don't really know what you're doing and you're overworking the skin, because the tattoo is not going to heal up good at all. Another thing would be infection. You know, people are always using their hands, and if they're not staying clean whenever their tattoo is healing, there's a huge chance for infection. So that's why I recommend just to kind of hold off until you do have a couple of years under your belt and you're completely confident. So if something does go wrong, you know that it was probably something on the client's end instead of yourself. So we're going to get into the design. Now, with this, I'm going to be working on my iPad just because I like to pull up pictures of actual hands and kind of draw over top of them on a different layer so I could get everything filled in perfectly. If you do not have an iPad and you're just working with, you know, like a pen, pencil, or paper, what you could do is print off a picture of a hand and just draw over top of it like that. That way you could do the same exact thing I'm doing with my iPad, even if you don't have one. Another thing you want to think about is you want to make sure you're getting a picture of a hand that doesn't have any tattoos on it already. So if I put my hand up there and try to draw around it, obviously I already have tattoos here and it's going to be really hard to try to see what you're doing. So I like to go on Pinterest or Google and just pull up a picture of a hand and then just use that as my reference point. Or if I already pre-talked to my clients and I have an idea in mind, I'll actually take a picture of their hand because, you know, obviously hand sizes can be different. Okay, so we have the hand picked out, and this is one I just pulled off Pinterest. You could do this as well. If you were to draw on actual like paper and using a pencil, all you would need to do is really, you could even trace your hand like this on the paper and then use, you know, whatever area you'd want to tattoo, doing it that way. That's what I did whenever I first started out, and there wasn't really anything like this to use. Now let's get into the designs. You want to make sure that any design that you are making for a hand is facing down. So it is facing the way that it should if you would look at it this way. So you don't want the design being upside down on the hand. That would look weird. Another thing would be, depending on what side you're doing, you know, left or right, if this was the hand that you were doing, you want to make sure if you were having something faced a certain kind of way, you want to have it facing inward. So that's another point whenever you are making tattoos for hands that you have to stick the sides, because if I was getting this tattoo, this moth cover up, and it was faced the other way, it would look really awkward. It wouldn't look like it goes together with everything else. So that is one thing to think about as well. Now, when it comes to hand tattoos, one of the biggest things you're going to see out there is going to be like flowers, things like that. I'm not going to do a flower because it's done so much, but if you were, all you would really need to do is, you know, make 2 circles and then go on from there making a design. I actually did a video on how to make a rose design and how to do a rose tattoo. So if you would like to see that after this video, you could just go back through and check them out. anytime you are tattooing for a hand, you want to make sure that you are taking up the full area. The biggest problem I see whenever people are drawing for hands is they'll just do a small design in the middle of the hand, and you can see how awkward that looks. So there's so much room for the design to be bigger, and there's so much free area that it just looks really awkward in the middle of the hand. So anytime I do hands, I definitely recommend the person to get filler around it or do the design big enough so it actually fills up the hand. Just like I got done on mine, so I filled it in with smoke around the area to fill up everything. That looks a lot better than having a small design in the middle of the hand. Okay, so whenever I first start out, I come up with an idea that I want to draw. If you aren't really there yet, if you're having a hard time kind of picking out whatever you want to draw, you can always look up references. This will help you out a lot whenever you are first starting, if you can't just draw out of your head yet. So when it comes to the design, I'm going to draw eyeball on the hand. We'll do that. So I'm going to start out with my red, and I'm going to map out just pretty much where I'm going to have everything go. I'm not going into detail or anything like that. I'm just creating the flow, and of course I'm going to have the eyeball with the middle facing this way, so just like that, so it flows with the body and everything. Let's have the eyeball facing this way. Yeah, so we're just going to map out this area, getting a feel for where everything's going to go. And remember, we're not going to go down on the knuckles, so it's going to stop right about here. Now we could do some shading, you know, fill in these areas, but you don't want to go down and take up too much area over the knuckles because it's just going to fall out. It's not going to look great at all. So somewhere like that, and then the shading would end there on the actual tattoo. So from here, what we do is we'll go into the actual line work. We're just going to go right over top of this, but this time we're going to go more into detail about where everything needs to go. So this is going to be our final design, so we're being very careful with all of our lines, and we're going to do some different line weights going with this design. And if you're having trouble with like being able to tell where everything is, you could always hit that little right N right there, and that'll change the opacity. That'll help you out a lot if you're just drawing and trying to go over areas you already went over. This is going to be our light source right here, so a little dot in the eye that's not going to be colored in. Yeah, just going through here and doing all the line work. I'm going to fast forward this part so you don't have to watch me do every little detail. Okay, so now I got done with the rough design. This would be what I would use for my line work. So I'd pull this off and make a stencil with this in order to create a great tattoo. Now, with some of these areas, this is going to be whipped out below. That's not going to be a straight cut off, you know, if this was an actual tattoo design. These are all things you want to think about when you are tattooing. And if you are first starting out, I definitely recommend that you go in and color in this design. If it's something that you don't really know what colors you want to use, definitely go in there and color it first. That way you know exactly what you're going to do when it comes to the tattoo. Another thing you could do for your actual stencils for this would go through and do your dots for all the shading. So, you know, this would be my light source. I'd do this area right here lighter than the other colors. That's obviously going to be light right there. And then going through, and these would be all our shading marks, so we know exactly where it's going to take up on the actual tattoo, just like that. And another thing, if you're drawing a design that doesn't take up a ton of area, so you're drawing a rose, which is a perfect circle, that's why people add in leaves and things like that to a design. So with that being said, what is your favorite hand tattoo design that you have seen? All you have to do is comment down below. I'd love to see what you guys enjoy when it comes to seeing things on a hand. Awesome. So another thing I want to touch base on before we finish up this video would be the colors that you put on a hand. You have to think that every tattoo is going to fade through time, and the hand is no exception. They actually fade a little bit faster because they're always out in the sun. You're always using them, things like that. So when it comes to color, it's really something you have to think about whenever you are designing your tattoo. Most of the time I like to stick to black and gray just because it holds up really good through time. You don't have to deal with a ton of fading and things like that. But if your customer did want color, I definitely recommend going with like reds, blues, something that will hold up through time. Yellows you could use as little areas in there, but just think that it is going to fade. And the last thing, if you are using on an iPad, all you really have to do to get it sized up is hold the client's hand over top of the actual image. And if it's about the same size, all you have to do is take off that layer, and you can print that off right there, and that's what it'll come off if you're using the 12-inch iPad. If you're using the smaller one, this trick won't work for you, but that's why I got the bigger iPad, just so I know it'll print off about the same size as I draw it. So this is how you design for tattooing a hand, all the tricks that I've learned and how I do it on a weekly basis or whenever I do have a hand tattoo come in. Make sure you guys are liking and subscribing down below so you can be up to date on all the new videos we come out with. And if you are first starting tattooing and you need some extra help on how to do line work, make sure you check out our line work secrets guide down below. Thank you guys for watching, and you guys have a wonderful day.